They said it could not be done. They said no man, no gun, no crew could ever make a shot like that in the middle of a real battle. The distance was too far. The target was too small. The air, the ground, the wind, and even the curve of the earth all worked against it. And yet, on a summer afternoon in 1944, one British gunner looked through his sights, made a calm calculation, and pulled the trigger. Minutes later, a German tank burning on the horizon proved that the impossible had just happened. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below. What makes this story so powerful is not just the shot itself, but the silence before it, the long pause where doubt lives, the moment when every rule of combat says, "Do not try," but experience quietly says, "Maybe." This was not a lucky guess fired in panic. It was a decision made by a man who understood his weapon, his enemy, and the thin line between failure and history. The story begins not with the shot itself, but with the long and brutal road that led to it. By July 1944, the Second World War in Western Europe had reached a dangerous turning point. The Allied landings in Normandy had taken place on 6 June 1944, and while the beaches were secured, the fighting inland was far from easy. The German army, especially its armoured units, was still strong, well-led and deadly. Fields, hedgerows, villages and ridgelines across Normandy had turned into killing grounds where tanks hunted tanks at close range. Normandy was not open country like North Africa. It was tight, broken terrain. Tall hedgerows blocked vision. Sunken roads hid enemy guns. Every field could be a trap. For tank crews, this meant danger at every turn. German units used this terrain perfectly, allowing them to strike first and vanish before Allied forces could respond. German Panthers and Tigers were feared weapons. Thick armour, powerful guns and experienced crews made them deadly at long distances. Allied tank crews knew this fear well. Many had watched shells bounce off German armour while return. Fire cut through Allied tanks like paper. To survive, the Allies needed better tactics, better coordination, and above all, better firepower. German Panther tanks, in particular, were designed for long-range combat. Their high-velocity 75mm guns could destroy Allied tanks before those tanks could even respond. German crews were trained to fight from distance, using ridgelines and open ground to their advantage. In Normandy, they often waited patiently, knowing that distance itself was a weapon. That firepower came in many forms, but one of the most important was a British gun called the Ordnance Quick-Firing 17-pounder. It was not a perfect weapon. It was heavy, hard to move, and difficult to fit inside a tank turret. But when it fired, it could punch through German armour at ranges other guns could only dream of. The 17-pounder became one of the few Allied weapons that German tank crews truly respected. British engineers had struggled to fit the 17-pounder into the Sherman tank. The result was the Sherman Firefly, a tank that looked ordinary at first glance but carried deadly power. Its long barrel stood out clearly on the battlefield, making it a priority target for German gunners. Firefly crews knew this. They knew that if the enemy spotted them, they would be hit first. By late July 1944, the battle for Normandy had shifted toward the high ground south of the city of Caen. This area was critical. Whoever controlled the ridges could see for miles and control the roads needed for any major advance. One of the most important of these positions was the Bourguebus Ridge, a long, gentle rise overlooking open farmland and small villages. The Germans knew its value, and so did the British. The ridge gave clear fields of fire in all directions. From its crest, German tanks could dominate the approaches, turning any advance into a slaughter. British commanders knew that without taking this ground, the breakout from Normandy would stall completely. On 8 August 1944, during Operation Totalize, British armoured and infantry units pushed south toward this ridge. The operation began at night, using heavy bombing and armoured columns to break through German lines. By daylight, the battlefield was chaotic. Smoke drifted across open fields. Wrecked vehicles burned where they had been hit hours earlier. The fighting was intense and confusing. Smoke from burning vehicles hung in the air. Artillery thundered day and night. Tank crews slept in their vehicles, ate when they could, and lived with the constant threat of sudden death from an unseen gun. Among the British units advancing that day was the 3rd Royal Tank Regiment. Attached to them were Sherman Firefly tanks, a special version of the American Sherman fitted with the powerful 17-pounder gun. These tanks were often kept slightly back from the main advance, using their long-range firepower to deal with German armour before it could strike. One of those Firefly crews was commanded by Sergeant George Harris. Harris was not famous at the time. He was not a general or a war hero with medals already on his chest. He was an experienced tank commander who had learned his trade the hard way, through training, combat, and the quiet knowledge that mistakes in war usually meant death. Harris had fought through Normandy's hardest days. He had seen tanks explode without warning. He had watched skilled men vanish in seconds. These experiences shaped his judgment. They taught him patience. They taught him when to wait and when to act. That afternoon, as British forces advanced, German tanks began to appear on the far side of the ridge. They were Panthers, among the best tanks Germany had. Well positioned and partially hidden by terrain, they were preparing to fire on the advancing British units. At that range, most Allied tanks could do little more than draw attention to themselves. The German Panthers believed they were safe. Their crews trusted distance. They trusted armour. They trusted experience. From where they sat, the British tanks below looked small and helpless. Sergeant Harris and his crew halted their Firefly in a concealed position. The tank was stationary, engine low, crew silent except for quiet commands. Harris raised his binoculars and scanned the ridgeline. Through heat haze, smoke, and distance, he spotted movement. A Panther tank, hull down, barely visible, but unmistakable. The range was estimated at around 4,200 metres, about 2.6 miles. For a tank gunner, this was beyond extreme. Most tank engagements in Normandy happened under 1,000 metres. Many happened under 500. At over 4,000 metres, hitting a moving tank-sized target was considered nearly impossible. Even if the shell reached that far, small errors in range, wind, or elevation would send it harmlessly into the ground. The crew knew the numbers, they knew the theory, and they knew that no one expected a hit. But Harris also knew something else. He knew his gun, he knew his crew, and he knew that the Panther was stationary, confident in its distance and position. That confidence was its weakness. He ordered the gun laid on the target. Inside the Firefly, everything slowed. The gunner adjusted elevation far beyond normal settings. The loader rammed a 17-pounder armour-piercing round into the breech. Inside the tank, the air was thick with sweat, oil, and tension. Outside, the battlefield continued its chaos, unaware that history was about to be made. Harris took one last look through his optics. The Panther was still there, still exposed, still confident. He gave the order to fire. The 17-pounder roared, the recoil shaking the tank as the shell left the barrel at tremendous speed. The crew waited. At that distance, there was no instant result. Seconds passed, long seconds, too long for normal tank combat. Those seconds felt endless. No one spoke, no one moved. All eyes stayed locked on the distant ridge. Then, on the ridgeline, a flash appeared. Smoke. Followed. Through binoculars, Harris saw the unmistakable sign of a hit. The Panther erupted in flames, black smoke pouring from its hatches. Against every expectation, the shot had struck home. German crews nearby were stunned. They had believed themselves safe at that distance. British units advancing below the ridge saw the burning tank and felt a surge of confidence. Word spread quickly through the regiment. A Firefly had knocked out a Panther from over 2.6 miles away. The shot was not luck alone. It was skill, calculation, patience, and a deep understanding of weapon and terrain. The Panther had been stationary. The Firefly had time to aim. The 17-pounder had the range and power. All the rare conditions needed for such a shot had come together in one moment. This engagement is widely considered one of the longest-range confirmed tank kills of the Second World War. It did not end the battle. It did not win the war by itself. But it mattered. It mattered because it shattered assumptions. It mattered because it proved that German armour was not untouchable. And it mattered because it showed how experience and calm under pressure could turn the tide, even in small but powerful ways. The fighting around Bourguebus Ridge continued for days. Tanks burned on both sides. Villages changed hands. Men were wounded, killed, and exhausted. The Allies eventually secured the high ground, opening the way for further advances into France. Operation Totalize helped break the stalemate around Caen. Within weeks, German forces were retreating eastward. The road to Paris was opening. The war in Western Europe had entered its final phase. Sergeant Harris survived the war. He did not become a celebrity. His shot became a footnote in history books and a legend among tank crews. But for those who were there, and for those who later studied the battle, it remained a powerful reminder of what was possible. In war, there are moments when the rules seem fixed. Distances, limits, expectations. And then there are moments when someone dares to test those limits, not with recklessness, but with discipline and belief in their craft. On that August afternoon in Normandy, a British gunner looked across 2.6 miles of enemy-held ground and took a shot that everyone said could not be made. And when the smoke cleared, the battlefield had one less German tank, and history had one more story worth remembering. Because sometimes the impossible is only impossible until someone proves otherwise. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.